is the second world? Are there only two worlds?
Let us be clear. We do not talk about only two worlds. We are saying there are any number of versions of Earth, thousands of them that exist simultaneously, millions of them that exist simultaneously. It is a misinterpretation and a misunderstanding by people that we're only talking about two different versions of Earth. There are multiple versions of Earth. There is the one that you're on now. And again, remember, you are constantly shifting through different versions of Earth billions of times per second. So there are billions of versions of Earth. The idea is that you are navigating through billions of different versions every second, going in the direction of what your strongest vibrational frequency is. That's how you navigate it. Ultimately winding up on the versions, through the versions, the multiple versions of Earth that are more and more representative of the frequency that you're giving off. So please understand that even every second, there are billions of versions of Earth. It's not just two.
Okay,
They are all here. They are all now, but they are separated by frequency. So as you adjust your own frequency, you gravitate and go in the direction of the versions of Earth that are more reflective of the frequency and the energy that exists within you.
Okay. This question is, can my current identity, as this person's name is Sandy, determine where a counterpart and a member of my oversoul will go? Can I decide while I'm here in physical form where a concurrent version of myself will be born and to whom?
You can become aware of that, but you cannot decide that because it has already been decided in your spirit agreement, pre-birth. So any counterparts have already made an agreement with you, and you have made an agreement with them to be born in certain places, to have certain incarnational experiences that may overlap your own timeline, your own life. But the idea is that you can become aware of that, but you're not the one determining that. It's already been determined by agreement between you before this life.
Are spiritual beings like ascended masters still elevating their own consciousness since they have a knowing they are part of all that is? At that level, or what level, is the edge of consciousness if it's constantly expanding? What is beyond that?
It never ends. Beings are always ascending. There is always more to experience. There is no beginning and there is no ending. There is nothing beyond it except more experience, more understanding, different perspectives. Remember, even the idea that humans talk about becoming one with all that is, there can still be different versions of becoming one with all that is, different versions of all that is. So it never ends. Beings are constantly accelerating, ascending, and expanding.
Okay, this person had a dream involving a blue being. She was beautiful. In this dream, I walked into the room she was sitting in, and a door next to her leading outside was open. The weather outside was chaotic, raining with winds, leaves blowing about. When I saw her sitting there, she looked at me, and I could feel in my body myself trying to calm the weather outside the door. She looked over at me, and I immediately said, "You're Lemurian." She responded by raising her arm with a smirk on her face, and the weather outside became calm. Was she an aspect of me? If not, why was she interacting with me, and why was she there showing what she did with no form of communication?
But there was a communication. She was showing you by her actions how the Lemurians were so well connected to nature, such a close offshoot from the Anunnaki, being blue tinted, most of them, that they could actually, with their own emotions, control the weather. So it's a counterpart from the same oversoul as you, and therefore you are connected in that way. And she is demonstrating to you the idea that weather is the product of the collection of the emotional vibrations of your species, that you still can be, if you are so willing, be connected that strongly to nature if you start understanding yourself like they did as nature, as an expression of nature, not that you live in nature, but that you live as nature. The Lemurians were extremely well connected to nature and often performed these kinds of feats.
Fascinating. Regarding shape-shifting, how is the process experienced by the individual doing the shifting? If the molecular structure is not changing, are they able to perform feats that characterize that animal, like flying, seeing in the dark, breathing underwater, etc.?
Yes, again, it's not the idea that the form you start with is molecularly changing. It's the idea that you have shifted to another counterpart in another reality, a parallel reality, so that you are expressing what that counterpart energy is in its identity, be it human, be it animal, be it tree, be it rock, doesn't matter. The idea is that from the perspective of the person doing it, they contain an overall understanding of the shift. They maintain a connection to what they started out as an overview. It's like suddenly seeing from the oversoul perspective and allowing them to perceive simultaneously all the different probabilities, all the different projections, all the different extensions of the oversoul, and being able to consciously choose which one they would choose to appear as, which one they would choose to express themselves through. Very similar to the idea, by analogy, of sort of looking through different glasses, trying them on, and knowing that each time you try on a new pair, not only are you seeing a different reality, but you are expressing yourself as the being in that reality in whatever way you've chosen to. So there's an overview, like an oversoul overview for that person, maintaining the general overall perspective. And at the same time, there is the perspective and the experience of shifting to a counterpart in whatever form that counterpart may be expressing itself.
This person would like clarification about the process of how we move to a different universe when we change. If I were to see myself as me living in universe number 813, and then when I change, I'm still me from universe 813, but I've moved to universe 814. My questions are, who takes my place in universe 813? And what was in my place universe number 814 before I got there?
You are looking at this concept from a linear perspective, and that is why it seems confusing. The idea is to understand that from the level you're talking about, it's not you, the personality. The idea is that it's you, the bigger being, that is now perceiving through more of yourself. Versions of you are still in 813, while versions of you are also in 814. It's just that you're shifting your perspective, your awareness, in a way that isolates it one universe at a time, the way that you are presenting this. But you are actually experiencing your greater self through all of the universes simultaneously. So the concept of quote unquote shifting doesn't mean that you're leaving one universe and arriving in another. It means that you are simply becoming more aware of the fact that you occupy, as the greater being, all universes simultaneously and can choose how to perceive yourself and from what perspective to perceive yourself at any given moment. It doesn't discount the idea that another version of you, another aspect of your greater being, is still continuing to perceive itself from the idea of universe 812 or 813 while you are perceiving another aspect of yourself as universe 814. So it's all going on simultaneously. You're not leaving one place and going to another. That's just the way you experience it from a linear perspective.
And the bottom line is that basically the consciousness that you perceive as being you is always perceiving itself as being the only one in a sense,
In a
because it's
sense,
looking through its own personality viewpoint.
yes,
Right.
remember the idea, taking it, so to speak, all the way up the ladder, is the concept that many humans have of blending with God, blending with Source, doesn't mean you lose your identity. It means you see yourself as Source. So the idea is that Source perceives itself as all possible realities, all possible universes simultaneously. So when you talk about the idea of quote unquote leaving one universe and going to another, that's not what's really happening. You're just broadening your perspective to see another aspect of yourself from a higher perspective, as from Source. So you understand that there is still going to be a part of you experiencing 813 while another part of you is experiencing 814. It's just that you can also choose to shift your focus or narrow your focus in a way that makes it seem as if you have shifted from one universe to another. But you're
And that
existing in all of them simultaneously.
and that idea that circumstances don't matter, only state of being matters. That remaining focused on that idea, regardless of what reality you're experiencing, is the ticket to being able to shift to a more preferred physical experience.
Yes, in a sense, that's an offshoot of what we're talking about, but not directly involved in what we were just explaining.
Okay. Now this is maybe the same thing. I don't know if you want to expand based on this, but the question is, considering the concept of infinite realities and the billions of frames we experience every second, is it accurate to say that within each person's view of one of those frames, there are infinite possible variations, each representing a different reality? Also, if infinite versions of those frames exist, does this imply that there are endless viewpoints for each frame from everything in existence? Or does it mean that there are infinite frames in relation to my own perspective, or perhaps an infinite multiplication of perspectives based on each individual's viewpoint?
Every single viewpoint, every single change is an entirely different frame. So when you say, can one frame have multiple perspectives? No. Another perspective is a different frame. So it's an infinite number of frames. Now, an infinite number of frames may not be relevant for any particular physical life. That could only involve a finite number of frames that are relevant for that life. It doesn't mean an infinite number of frames don't exist. It just may be that the majority of them are not relevant to the finite number that is relevant for that particular life. But in terms of the way that you have, quote unquote, framed that question, pun intended, the idea is to understand that any variation whatsoever, no matter how, quote unquote, small, is a completely different frame. So it's not that one frame has multiple perspectives, another perspective is another frame.
Contact experiences. Are permission slips just speeding up the process for our agreements?
Yes, you still have free will in terms of how you experience the agreements. The fact that agreements have been made doesn't necessarily always mean that every single specific detail has been laid out. You are still allowed to determine for yourself through your free will exactly how you might want to go about experiencing that idea if such an agreement exists. So you can even change your mind and not experience the idea of the contact. The idea, again, is that your free will is respected in that context. So the agreements are fulfilled by various means. And yes, permission slips can, based on your belief systems, accelerate some of those things. Permission slips can, by various agreements, even slow down some of those things. So it's about how you want to go about fulfilling the agreement if you still wish to. The idea of your agreement to have contact with extraterrestrials is not quite the same as the idea of the agreements to experience certain things in your physical reality in terms of your lifetime, the things that are representative of your themes and your challenges. Experience and interactions with extraterrestrials can be folded in to the idea of some of the themes of your exploration. But by definition, we are a little bit outside your venue, outside the idea of your timeline, until such time as enough of you make an agreement that encounters with ETs actually are part of your overall agreement, your overall timeline. That's kind of what permission slips are all about, is getting you to a point, if you're so willing, where the idea of encounters with beings in other realities can actually be seen as part of your natural timeline, part of your natural agreement. So that's part of the process, and why sometimes permission slips can assist you in getting used to that idea and bringing our timelines and your timelines together in a single mutual shared timeline experience.
Okay, and this person is asking about the soul and the soul tribe. She says, I understand that we are eternal beings. Is our family, parents, kids, pets, etc., always going to be with us? Are we all part of a soul family and go through these experiences together?
Yes. Now, again, you can spin off and go have an adventure by yourself if you really wish to. That doesn't necessarily include the idea of other members of your soul family. But the idea is that you're still always connected and you'll always come back and recognize the family. So, in a sense, yes, you're always connected. It doesn't mean you can't have your own independent adventures.
And this person is asking, what is the source of sadness and can it be avoided? Should we be striving for happiness, or will it simply come to us if we follow the formula?
Sadness is the result of a belief and a definition of disconnection from source. Disconnection is the idea. If you understand you cannot be disconnected, you cannot feel sadness. So in the idea of creating certain limitations for yourself, for your consciousness to experience, including the experience of disconnection, even though you can never actually be disconnected from source, you can experience the idea of that disconnection as a kind of loss, and that can promote the experience of sadness. But yes, if you understand how the formula works and you apply it precisely, then you also have the understanding, based on knowing how things work, that you can never be disconnected. And thus there is no reason to experience sadness in that way. So by really precisely following the formula, it is highly unlikely for you to choose to experience sadness.
Okay, and this person is asking, basically, her daughter took her life 16 months ago. Was
Yes.
this in her contract? Was it meant to be? Is she okay? This person feels stuck and broken. How can she reconcile this nightmare? Please help me, I'm drowning.
All right. Well, take a deep breath. It's all right. Your daughter is fine. Once in spirit, remember, you see yourself for what you really are, who you've always been. So the idea is that she may have gone through her life review and realized that no, it's not necessarily a part of the contract to commit suicide in the way that most people on your planet commit suicide. The timing of your death is the timing of your death naturally, and committing suicide, in a sense, is a little bit like breaking the agreement. But the idea is that the soul learns from that experience and realizes that may not have been the ideal choice, realizes they may simply have not ever had the information required for them to make a different choice. But they're perfectly fine, absolutely eternal and indestructible. going through the life review to realize they could have done things in a different way, experiencing the effect that their suicide and the choices that they made to commit suicide have had on other people, including you, and therefore sending you love and letting you know that they may, in a sense, be sorry that they did that, for it was not their intention to make you experience the idea of grief over their commission of suicide. And now they know, in a sense, better from a different perspective, that that may not necessarily have been the ideal choice for them to make. But they send you love, unconditional love. They want you to know they are fine. You will meet them again. Again, everyone meets everyone. And again, they are learning a lesson that will allow them to make more positive choices in the future. So they're perfectly fine. Take a deep breath and allow yourself to let go of the grief, because the grief can get in the way of receiving communications and messages from your daughter to let you know she is perfectly fine.
Okay. And this question is, how is there such a thing as non-existence? Does anything not exist, or does everything exist? Is there nothing that doesn't exist? Does everything I can think of, every wild and ridiculous scenario, exist simultaneously in a parallel universe?
Yes, non-existence does not exist by definition. That's its quality, to not exist. That which exists cannot become non-existent because non-existence doesn't exist. So there's nowhere for that which exists to go. The idea of every wild idea you have being a reality somewhere, yes, that's true, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a reality that is similar to your reality. Even the very idea that someone may have a wild idea and render it as a piece of artwork means it exists in some way, shape, or form. Even if it exists in another form other than an actual expression of a living being, it still exists. So the idea is it exists in whatever is relevant for it to exist according to its own logic, its own context. But anything you can imagine in some way, shape, or form exists. It doesn't mean it's real in the same context that you consider yourself to be real, but it's real in the sense that it does exist in some form that's relevant for its context, for its reality. So even if it's something exists as an idea, even if something exists as a cartoon, it still exists in its own context. It doesn't mean it's flesh and blood like you are. But you cannot imagine non-existence. So everything you imagine does somehow, in some way, in some form, exists. And again, nothing that exists can become non-existent because non-existence by definition doesn't exist. That's its quality, to not exist.
This person had this dream, and in the dream, they were with some grays, and they were laughing and chatting about how scared the human race is of them. I remember telling them that they are great beings and there's nothing to be afraid of. Was this an actual interaction with them in the astral realm?
Yes.
Okay.
There is no more to be said. Yes, is the answer.
Okay. This question is, during a deep meditation moment where I was in an endless library of information, I encountered another human that is well known, and we acknowledged each other's presence. Is it possible to encounter another human that may be aligning with the same frequency as you in a given moment?
Yes, of course. That's what it's all about. It's all about resonance. It's all about frequency. Someone who has an interest in similar things to you can wind up in a similar frequency, and you can cross paths with them, especially in the idea of other realms and other dimensions that are relevant for both of you to be experiencing simultaneously. So yes, of course it can happen that way.